If you're new today, we've been going through the book of Philippians, so I encourage you to open your Bibles to Philippians chapter 4, as we're going to study verses 10 through 13 today. I was talking about my mother's estate sale, and my mom didn't own a whole lot of stuff, and honestly, there was only $3,500 raised from the auction, and if you took out my dad's collectibles, it was probably only $2,500 worth of stuff. There were dishes my mom was still eating on that I ate on when I was a little kid. The furniture was the same. Even on the walls were some things that hadn't moved since I was a kid. There was a plaque on the wall in the dining room. It's folded hands like this, and there's a quote by Alfred Lord Tennyson that says, "More things in this world are wrought by prayer than this world dreams of." And I said, you know what? I'm going to take that for me. And I took it off, and I packed it in my stuff because that spoke volumes of my mother. She didn't have a lot. But what she did have, she acquired through prayer. And the things that made an impact in her life, the things she treasured most, were the things that she had acquired through her prayer. So there weren't a lot of things, furniture and dishes and objects that my mom held on to that really had much value at all because she valued people. She valued what God was doing in her life and the lives of her kids and the lives of her church. And so when we look at the Apostle Paul, I said my mom was a lot like Paul, because we're going to read about him in Philippians chapter 4 of how God had caused him to live above the circumstances in his life. And so you can follow along in your Bible or follow on the screen behind me as I read these verses. Paul says, "I rejoiced in the Lord greatly that now at length you have revived your concern for me. You were indeed concerned for me, but you had no opportunity. Not that I'm speaking of being in need, for I have learned in whatever situation I am to be content. I know how to be brought low, and I know how to abound. In any and every circumstance, I have learned the secret of facing plenty and hunger, abundance and need. I can do all things through him who strengthens me." Now, you guys probably know that last verse, right? I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. It's a famous verse, one of the most famous verses in the Bible, and it's a verse that you ought to commit to memory. It's a verse that will carry you through a lot of circumstances. Now, Paul is speaking of a specific situation in his life, but I believe this verse is one of those that does apply to a lot of other situations as well. I can do beyond what I can do on my own because of Christ living within me. One of the things I did when I was on my little break was I watched a 30 for 30 special on ESPN, and there's a coach. His name's Rob Mendez. He doesn't have any arms or legs, and he was brought in as a coach of a high school football team. And people were just shocked, like, how can this guy coach football? But he was a phenomenal football coach. And one of the reasons he could be phenomenal because of what he'd been through. And he loved those boys on his team, and he would tell them, this would be one of their chants. He would yell out to them, "Who says I can't?" And they would respond, "No one." "Who says I can't?" And they would shout back, "No one." And they would do this like repeatedly, even before the football game. On the day of the game, he'd get them all in the huddle, and you're the huddle, okay? "Who says I can't?"
No one.
"Who says I can't?"
No one.
"Who says I can't?"
No one.
Yeah! And that's how the coach would start the game. Those guys would come running out there ready to compete. Well, I think that's what Paul's saying here. Who says I can't? No one. I can because of Christ within me. Now, he's going to point out three powerful forces. Any one of these forces can wield control over your life. But only one of them is worthy of having that control. See, the first one he identifies is people. People will lift you up, and then people will let you down. See, life is really all about people. It's about relationships. We've been made for relationships. God wired us. The greatest joys you'll experience in life will come through relationships, family, friends, people you work with. The greatest joys in life will come through your relationships. At the end of your life, you will focus on the relationships. That's just how God wired us, and I think it's true. You know, I love my family. I love spending time with my family over that break. I love coming back to my church family. I love my staff. I love the elders. I love you guys. I love being with people. People are a great joy. A couple weeks ago, a friend of mine from Arizona visited. He was helping another church in town, and this friend, Tom, and I go way back. The second year I was in ministry, I was a children's pastor at my last church. He offered himself and said, "Hey, if you need help, I'm willing to help." Well, he not only began to help then, he's been helping for over 30 years in children's ministry. And he's been chairman of the elders of a 12,000-member church, working with kids. This will be his last month working with kids. He's going to be part of a new church plant. But we hung out and we visited churches and we went up to the Skirted Heifer for lunch. And we just, reminisced on a lot of things. And although we don't talk very often, when you get us together, the friendship just reignites. I love people. But you know what's interesting about people? Not only do they reward you and bless you, they frustrate the heck out of you. I mean, I've been told ministry would be so good if it weren't for the people. But then there'd be no ministry. Because sometimes it's the very same people that you love being with and have rewarded you now are a big pain. Now let's just say you married this man or woman and you thought, man, I can't wait spending every day with this person. It's going to be so heavenly. We'll be together every night and it'll be like a honeymoon forever. Now you've been married for 10 years or so and man, you get on each other's nerves. I need some space. I need to get away from you. I need my own time. I need to watch my show right now. And you get, the same person that brought you great joy now is frustrating you. Or you have a baby. Oh, this cute little baby. She's so cute. Oh, adorable. It's like a stuffed animal. I love this little one. And now she's a teenager. Oh, my goodness. I can't wait till she graduates. Got a new job and my boss is fantastic. Love the people I work with. A year later, man, I can't stand my boss. The people I work, they're getting on my nerves. So, it's the people will lift you up and then people will let you down. That's why you can't let people control your life. See, Paul understands this. Paul looks at Timothy and Epaphroditus and says, man, those are good guys. They work with me. They encourage me. But then there's these ladies in the church there in Philippi, Euodia and Syntyche, and they've got conflict, and man, people are a headache, and I wish we'd just get over that. He knows that people do good in your life, they bless you, and then they're a burden in your life. And he sees that. In fact, in the first chapter, we talked about this way back at the beginning. This church partnered with Paul in his ministry. When he went there and planted this church, that church said, Paul, we're going to support you in your missionary ventures. And so they began to send him financial aid different times throughout his ministry. Now it's about 10 years later. And Paul says, at last you've renewed your concern for me. What had happened? Well, they stopped giving. And this is a time when Paul needed it the most. See, all through Paul's ministry, when he's been able to roam free, he has a side job making tents. So he's a tent-making missionary, which means he's got a job on the side that helps to support his ministry. But now he's in prison. He can't make tents. And either he takes what the prison gives him, which, by the way, it's not cable TV, cafeteria food, and suit to wear. No, he gets really nothing. Very minimal. Maybe bread and water. I don't know. He gets very minimal, except what his loved ones send him. And so they send him this kind of like gift package. Financial, maybe other things with it. Maybe some ladies made cookies and bread and stuff, sent it. But he says, at last you've renewed your concern for me. But understand this. What they gave him, as much as it was a blessing, Paul said, I'm okay either way. Whether you gave me something or not, I'm okay either way. See, Paul says, I believe you were concerned, you just didn't have the opportunity to show it. And now you showed it. So you can tell people you care, but you got to show them you care before they really believe it. So often, when there's a crisis in someone's life, and I hear this, and I've honestly said it myself at times, and I'm trying to change that, but when someone is in a need, they're going through a crisis, they've had surgery, they've lost a loved one, whatever the burden is, you say to them, hey, if you need anything, give me a call. Hey, I'm here for you if you need me. Have you ever said that? I want to encourage you, don't say that ever again. Here's why. Most of us will never call you. Most of us will never pick up the phone. Last service, I went like this. I went, we don't hold phones like that anymore. Some of you know, why is his hand round? No, it's flat. So it's my phone. It's my cell phone. Picking up my cell phone, and I'm not going to pick it up and say, hey, I could really use a home-cooked meal. I'm not going to do that. Here's what you should do. And I've seen people do this, and it's wonderful. Hey, I'm bringing a meal over on this week. Is Tuesday night better or Wednesday night? And their only response is, which night? It's not yes or no. Hey, I've got a group. We're going to come over and clean your house. Can we do that Saturday morning or Saturday afternoon, which is best for you? They're going to love it because all they have to do is say, oh, that'd be so awesome. How about Saturday afternoon? But if you'd ask them, hey, you want me to get a group together, come over and clean your house? They're going to say no. Why? Because we don't want to be a burden. So just go for it. Say, hey, I'm bringing over, and sometimes it may be something simple like, hey, we got, here's pizza and ice cream. We know you guys need to eat. If they already have food, they'll stick it in the freezer and ice cream in the freezer, and put the pizza in the refrigerator. They'll eat it sometime. But just do it. Just do it. Don't ask them to come to you to ask for it, okay? And so this group, they send Paul this care package, and Paul says, oh, that's awesome. I'm grateful for that. But I just want you to know, I was okay even without it. I was okay even without it. I'm concerned for many of us, and I hear this even within Bible studies and different circles. We'll ask people how they're doing, and they'll say, if it weren't for my kids, I'd be doing great. Or, my people I work with, they're just getting on my nerves. And my spouse, he or she, they're driving me crazy. I want to tell you, if they're driving you crazy, take the keys away. Take the keys away. Why are you letting them drive you anywhere? Really, why are you letting them drive you anywhere? Nobody has to drive you crazy or mad or bonkers or whatever. Stop it. Just stop that. Take the key. Hey, you're not going to drive my car. Okay? I'm taking these back because if you let other people dictate how you're going to feel, you're going to be this yo-yo. And so many people say, I had a good day until so-and-so stepped into it, or before I got that letter from someone. See, people will let you down. Every person at some point is going to let you down in some way. And you've got to take the keys back. We see how Jesus responded to things like criticism and rejection different than his disciples. Here's an incident, Luke chapter 9. Jesus sent messengers ahead of him who went and entered a village of the Samaritans to make preparations for him. But the people did not receive him because his face was set toward Jerusalem. He's on a mission. He's going to go to Jerusalem. He's going to be rejected. He'll go to a cross. He'll die for their sins. But when his disciples, James and John, saw it, they said, Lord, do you want us to tell fire to come down from heaven and consume them? How dare they treat the master that way? Jesus, want to call it down? But he turned and rebuked them, and they went on to another village. So someone ticks you off. Someone cuts you off. Someone rejects you. And you feel like saying, Lord, I wish I could send a lightning bolt down right now. I wish I could call on the lightning. I wish I could call them a name at least. And Jesus says, hey, don't bother. We're going to move on. We're going to move on. See, so many of us get all bent out of shape because someone, rejects us or criticizes us. When I was first in ministry, that bothered me. I want to make everybody happy. So we had this big event called the Daddy-Daughter Banquet. It had about 100 dads and suits and little girls in dresses come, and we fed them a great meal. We played games, had music, and brought in a guest speaker who spoke to the dads. And he talked to the dads about how they could be great dads. I got a lot of dads that came up and said, Pastor, this is an incredible event. We had an awesome time. Wonderful. We need to do this again. All these things. I felt like I was on the cloud. It's just, man, this was a home run. Till Monday morning, I get a phone call from one of the dads. He said, we came Friday night, one of the worst things we've ever been to. I said, what? Were you at the church Friday night? Because all the other guys said how much they loved it. And he said, yeah, my daughter sat there bored stiff while that guy talked about doing the very thing we were doing that night, investing time with our daughters. And rather than celebrating that, it felt like he was shaming us. And you know what? As much as that hurt, I walked away saying, he's right. And we changed it from then on. We didn't talk about how to be better dads anymore. We just celebrated dads and their daughters. And it was a life-changing event. See, anytime you're in a position of leadership, you can be pastor, teacher, coach, chef, a boss, supervisor. You will, because of your position, you have to take a position. And when you take a position, there comes rejection and criticism. And so you have to have the hide of a rhinoceros, thick skin. You can't let every criticism throw you. And so sometimes you just the criticism came, okay, I'm still moving on. Many of us get so bent out of shape because of one negative comment. I didn't like your dress. Didn't like your hair. Oh, they didn't put like on Facebook. They didn't like my picture. So we're all bent out of shape because of someone else. Take the keys away. Quit giving people control over your emotions. You've heard the phrase before, I'm sure, because you're going to finish it for me. If mama ain't happy, ain't what? Ain't nobody happy. You know what? I'd say if mama ain't happy, tough luck, mama. I'm still going to be happy. I don't care if mama's happy or not. I'm still going to be happy. Amen. Nobody's going to steal my joy. Some of you have to stop it. Stop letting people steal your joy. Paul's in prison. He says, oh, these people, they don't support me anymore. They aren't sending any love gifts. I'm languishing here. He didn't do that. He said, thank you for your gift. But even if I hadn't got it, I was okay. I was okay. Because you don't have control over my emotions. And some of you need to look at the people around you and say, I'm free from you now. Some of you have to look at your kids. I'm free from you now. Sometimes even look at your spouse. Say, I'm free from you now. I don't have to be controlled by the people around me. Okay? I'm gonna release that. I'm gonna release that. And so Paul says, people are gonna lift you up. People will let you down. And then I think he's putting into practice what he said in just a few verses later, or verses earlier in verse 8. Listen to this. Sam read this last week. Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about those things. Think about those things. Think about the good things. So then Paul goes on. He talks about another force, circumstances. Circumstances, the power of circumstances. Now, he says, I know what it's like to live in abundance. I know what it's like to be brought low. I know what it's like to feast. I know what it's like to starve, but I'm okay. I can do all these things through Christ. You know, there are things around you, circumstances you can't control. You can't control the weather. You can't control the economy. You can't control the political climate. You can't control whether your team wins or loses. And yet so many of us, you know, we lose sleep over those things. Oh, man, the stock market's really down. Went down, 300 points. You know, it looks like it's going to be rainy the next few days, going to ruin our event. My team lost again. It makes me so mad. I could have slept better had my team won. Why are we letting things around us affect us like that? See, sometimes we will say things like, I'm doing okay under the circumstances. Under these circumstances, I'm making it. Well, why are you under the circumstances? Why don't you live above the circumstances? Live above those clouds. Say, I'm going to live up here, not down here. They're not going to dictate. I'm going to have a good day whether it's rainy or sunny. I'm going to have a good day whether the economy's up or down. I'm going to have a great day whether it's a Republican or Democrat or independent in the office. It doesn't matter. I'm going to have a good day whether my team wins or loses. It's going to be a great day. Why? Because I've already determined in myself that I'm going to be okay. That's a power that he's given us. I want to show you a picture. It's a thermometer and a thermostat. I want to encourage you to be a thermostat. See, a thermometer registers what's happening around. It's a reflection of the environment. So it's hot, thermometer goes up. If it's cold, it goes down. Many of us are like thermometers. We start to adapt to the culture around us. So if it's all tense, we become tense. If it's all angry and hostile, we become angry and hostile. If it's all panicky and fearful, we become panicky and fearful. But a thermostat regulates the environment. A thermostat says, hey, everyone else is tense, everyone else is, freaking out, not me. I'm going to bring peace to this environment. I'm going to bring stability to this environment. It's like the quarterback in the huddle where, it's 2-minute drive. All the rest of the team say, no, I don't. Can we win? Do you think we're going to score? The quarterback gets in the huddle and says, guys, we got this. We got this. We know what to do here, and we're going to win this game. Why? He's got his thermostat on. It's the business owner that when the economy's starting to tank says, we're going to survive this. We're going to weather this. Why? Because of you guys. We're a great team together. We're going to make it. Everyone else goes, okay. And their spirits go up. Parent, dad gets laid off and he could go home and stir the whole family into a mess, or he can say, you know what? I just got laid off, but we're going to be okay. God's in control. He's going to show us. He's always shown us. He's going to do it again. So we're going to give it to the Lord. That's a thermostat kind of a personality. It says, because of what's in me, we're going to bring stability to this chaotic environment. Be a thermostat, not a thermometer. Don't let the circumstances take control over you. Now, Paul says that in the midst of highs and lows, I've been able to be content. And that word content comes from a combination of two words, auto, arches. Auto means self, and arches means sufficient. And what this word means when it's put together is there is inward adequacy. What's in me is sufficient for this situation. And we're going to find out a little bit what's in Paul. But he says, I have what's needed in this situation. And we know that when you don't have much, you need contentment. When Julie and I got married, within a year, we had a family of 2 kids. I was making $9,000 a year. I was the only working adult in our family, making $9,000 a year. And so you know what? We learned the value of Goodwill, shopping at Goodwill. We used double and triple coupons. We weren't afraid to drive used cars. You know, we made do with what we had, and you know what? We made it. And the next year, I got a boost to $13,000 a year. Now, this is when my peers are making $30,000 a year. I'm making 13, but you know what? God got us through. And when you don't have much, you have to be content. Otherwise, you get very envious of other people. And you start to whine, or you go into debt trying to keep up with them. And so you appreciate things like Once Upon a Child. Some of you know what that is. Play It Again Sports. Facebook Marketplace. Craigslist. Wonderful resources. You say, hey, there's nothing wrong with this. Guy got a great deal on these places. So you have to learn contentment when you don't have much, but you really need contentment when you have more. I think you actually need it more when you have more. Because when you don't have much, your options are limited. I mean, when you don't have much, you go to the restaurant, and you, okay, everybody, look at the dollar menu. When you have more, the menu options open up. You go, oh, I can look at the next page and the next page because I have more options. You know, when you're poor, there's only certain kinds of cars you're going to drive, used ones. And when you have money that you can buy something new, you go, well, you know what? I don't have to drive used anymore. I don't have to go to Goodwill for clothes. I can actually buy some new clothes. And I don't have to go to Walmart to get them. I can go to a Dillard's or Macy's to get them. And so your options increase. Last year I posted on Facebook this incredible grocery store near my hometown. And they had a chip aisle that I could not believe. Potato chips, corn chips, all that kind of stuff, Pringles. And so I began to walk down the aisle just filming this row of chips. Honestly, it's almost twice as long as the width of this room. It just went on for almost 2 minutes of videotape, just recording, walk along. And then I get to the end, and some lady asked me what I was doing. I said, just showing my friends back home this incredible chip aisle. And she said, well, you missed the organic chips. Now, if you live in another country, and I've been to a lot of other countries, the chip aisle. But you know what? It de-stresses you a lot because you don't have a whole lot of options. This one, this one, this one. Which do I want? But the more options can complicate. And it actually raises another issue. Because I can have more, and because I can afford more, the question is, do I need more? See, there was a farmer Jesus talked about. This guy had a bumper crop, and it went so well that he began to build other barns to store all the stuff. And he gets all these barns packed with his stuff, and then he dies. And then God says to him, and now who will get what you stored up for yourself? See, so often we think that the more we have is for us. And maybe God doesn't want you to have more, but to help more. Maybe God's given you the blessing of extra, not so you can look at more options, but so you can still live pretty conservatively, and then you can be a blessing to other people. So contentment is needed in both times, whether good or bad, prosperity or poverty. There was a man who, this is a story that's floated around the internet. He wanted to teach his son a lesson about how blessed they were. He took him to a poor part of the world, and he says, look around. He says, look at what you see here. And after spending a couple days in this country, came back home and says, okay, son, what'd you learn? He says, well, Dad, I learned that we have a dog, but typical family there had 4 dogs. We have a pool in our backyard, but they had a creek to play in that just had no end. And we have these imported lanterns on our back deck, and they have stars to look at night. We have a porch we sit out in front, and they have a front yard that goes out to the horizon. We buy all our food. They make theirs. We have walls around our property to protect us, but their friends protect them. And then he said this to his dad, Dad, thank you. Because I finally realized just how poor we really are. It's all a matter of perspective. See, I've been to the mission field. I've been to Tanzania, poor parts of Namibia, Thailand, and Myanmar. And I'll tell you, they don't have near the stuff we have. And oftentimes they have greater joy than we have. Greater joy. Greater joy. And we, with all our stuff, see, even the poorest among, and I know we're at varied degrees even in this room, the poorest among us live better than the ancient kings. Do you know the ancient kings like King David, even King Solomon, never had an air-conditioned room? Couldn't turn a tap and get hot running water? Didn't have Wi-Fi? Oh my, kids, think about that. No Wi-Fi. Never drove in an automobile? Never flew in an airplane? Never tuned into the radio or watched a TV program? You know, and they were considered rich back then. It's all a matter of perspective. It's all a matter of who you live with and around. And sometimes if you have people that live at higher standards than you, you can start to think, well, that's the norm. Get out on a mission trip and you'll change your view. Because wealth is not a matter of what you have, but who you have living inside of you. See, Paul writes in here what he's learned. In 1 Timothy chapter 6, he said, godliness with contentment is great gain, for we brought nothing into the world, and we cannot take anything out of the world. But if we have food and clothing, with these we will be content. He's basically saying we'll be content with the basics. Now, does that mean that's all you should ever want is food and clothing? That's not what he's saying there. But he's saying if that's all you have, you're going to be okay. Now, God will bless you with other things. God has blessed all of us with many other things. But here's the key. I don't have to have those other things to be content. See, here's the danger. If you say, Lord, thank you for food and clothing, but if I don't have that new phone, if I don't have that car, if I don't get that job, I can't be content, then you're missing the point. It's not found in the stuff that we have. It's not found in the abundance or the lack of things. It's found in something else. And that's where we come to the real key to this passage. Where did Paul find the ability to get through all these things? It wasn't through people. It wasn't through just perfect circumstances. It was through another force, which is the most dynamic force in his life and should be the most dynamic force in our lives. It's Jesus Christ. Because through Jesus Christ, he was pleasantly sufficient. He had what he needed. He was inwardly adequate to be content. I would say not just content, joyfully content. That's why I put this word pleasantly. It's not like Paul's like just grinding it out. Woe is me, I'm doing this for Jesus. He said, no. I'm good. I am really good. I'm happier than you guys can think I am. I'm happier than you guys. And I'm in prison. I am thrilled. Why? Because God's done something within me that's freed me from needing all this stuff in my life. So he's finding that Christ in him is this secret. And he says in a couple ways that he's learned this. The first time he says in verse 11, I've learned in whatever situation to be content. This is your typical word for learning. It's learning through experience. It's learning through trial and error. He didn't just get a gift from God at conversion. He had to go through situations in his life where he learned it, just like we do. We go through situations, we learn, I'm going to be okay. I learned it. It's taken me a few years, but I've learned to be content. But then there's another word he uses in verse 12. And in this verse he says, I have learned the secret. Now this is a different word for learning. This is real interesting. It's the only use of this word in the whole Bible. And it's a learning that's tied with this word secret. Because Paul was doing ministry in an area where people had what they called the secret religions. The religions that had, they were cultic religions that if you were an initiated member, you got special insights from the gods. So if you were into this religion, the gods would reveal their teachings to you. And so what Paul says is, God has revealed something. In fact, this word is closely tied to the word mystery, which in the Bible means a truth hidden that is now revealed. God has revealed in me, through my relationship with him, the secret of being content. And why this is so important is Everyone can learn what verse 11 says, whether you're Christian or not. You can practice contentment. It's a virtue you can practice. You can learn it. You can grow in it. It can bless your life. But the second part, what Paul is indicating, this is something that only someone in a relationship with Jesus experiences. And some of you have experienced it, some of you haven't. Because it's a beautiful thing that when you experience it, you realize, you know what, I truly can say, doesn't matter what goes on in my life, I am pleasantly satisfied. How did that happen? Well, he learned to lean on Jesus. In Proverbs chapter 3, verses 5 and 6, it says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your paths straight. He learned it through leaning, learning through leaning. You learn through leaning on Jesus. And there are situations in your life where you are pushed to an edge, pushed to a limit. And in those times, do you lean into the Lord or do you pull away from him? Leaning in is where you find the secret coming to life. You lean into the Lord. Now, Paul experienced this many times in his life, and one of those is described in 2 Corinthians, the first chapter. He says, listen to this story, for we do not want you to be unaware, brothers, of the affliction we experienced in Asia, for we were so utterly burdened beyond our strength that we despaired of life itself. Does that sound like a tough moment of life? God, this is so hard, I just want to die. It's so hard, Lord, I just want to die. Indeed, we felt that we had received the sentence of death, but that was to make us rely not on ourselves, but on God, who raises the dead. He delivered us from such a deadly peril, and he will deliver us. On him we've set our hope that he will deliver us again. You hear what Paul's saying? God allowed me to go through this. God allowed us, not just Paul, but his team. God allowed us to go through such an excruciating situation that we had no option but to look to him. And he said, God allowed it. Why? So we wouldn't rely on ourselves, but on him, who through his power raises the dead. Do you know what? You may be going through a situation in your life that's really hard right now, almost unbearable, and you're crying out to God, God, I can't take it anymore. And you wonder why God just doesn't lift it from you. Maybe what God is doing, and I don't believe God causes all these crises and difficulties. I don't think he causes hardly any of them, to be honest. But these things we go through, God like doesn't rescue us out of it. He says, I'm going to let you go through it because what I want you to learn, it's the most important lesson you'll ever learn, is you have to lean on me. You have to lean on me. And that's what Paul did. He says, we realized we couldn't rely on our strength because it was beyond us. We had to rely on the Lord. And what did the Lord do? He brought us through. He who raised the dead brought us through, and he's going to do it again. And I can testify from my own life. There are times where I've reached my limit and said, God, I can't do this. I can't figure this out. I don't have the strength to accomplish this. And God says, good. It's about time you gave up on yourself and relied on me. Lean on me. Learning through leaning. A little bit later in that same book, 2 Corinthians, he writes, but we have this treasure in jars of clay to show that the surpassing power belongs to God and not to us. We are afflicted in every way, but not crushed, perplexed, but not driven to despair, persecuted, but not forsaken, struck down, but not destroyed. He uses this imagery here of a clay pot. And he says, we are the clay pot. We're clay pots. We have this treasure inside of us. The other night, Julie and I were watching Josh Gates on this Expedition Unknown special on Wednesday night, and he goes into the caves of Qumran. That's where the Dead Sea Scrolls were found, the greatest biblical historical find in history in the 1940s. And he went up in these caves, and they found a clay pot. And in those clay pots, back years ago, they found scriptures tucked away inside of those clay pots. These treasures were stored in fragile clay pots. And that's what Paul's saying here. You and I are clay pots. We're fragile. We're breakable. But within us, God puts something so powerful, so special, that though the waves of life may come and batter you, you are like a buoy in the sea. It's not going to pull you under. Why? Because of what's in you. What's in a buoy? Air. Air. And it may bounce around, but it ain't moving because it's firm. It's going to rise up above the circumstances because of what's inside of that buoy. And what's inside is air. That word in Greek is pneuma. That word means wind. That word means spirit. When the Holy Spirit's dwelling in you, you have adequate resources within you. You have the power of God within you to rise up. No matter what people around you do, no matter what the circumstances are. If they're good, you say, thank you, God, for that blessing. If they're bad, you say, you know what? We're going to ride through this. Nobody's going to steal my joy. Why? I've taken the keys away, and I've given them to Jesus Christ. He will be the driving force in my life. See, you may go home and say, honey, kids gather around. We're going to learn to be content as a family. That may be a good thing to teach, but that's not what I'm telling you today. I'm not telling you go home and be content. I'm telling you to lean on Jesus. I'm just telling you Jesus is sufficient. And some of you need, more than anything else in your life right now, need more of Jesus. Real Jesus. Not a Jesus on a picture, Jesus in a book, but the living presence of Jesus within you. Some of you have never really opened your life. I mean, Jesus has been someone out there who's not been in here. This is the key to Paul's life. Christ in me. Christ is dwelling in me. That's why I have the joy that I have, is Christ dwelling in you. Have you invited him in? Maybe you invited him in and you pushed him back out. You pushed him to the edges of your life. Let him not only be in your life, let him fill your life. And the situation you're in right now may be pretty tough. Maybe real tough. Lean into Jesus. So we're going to have a response time. I'm going to ask you to stand. I want to invite our prayer partners to be available up front here. If today's a day that you just realize, Lord, I need to lean into you more than ever before. Maybe it's for the first time. Maybe it's something you've just strayed from and drifted from. You just need to lean into Jesus today. We invite you to come as we sing. And maybe through prayer to say, Jesus, I need to trust you in this situation in my life today. I want to surrender this to you. Do that. Our prayer partners are willing to meet with you. They're loving people. They love you. They want to partner with you. So if you need prayer today, come forward as we sing this. And for the rest of us, let's just surrender our hearts and lives to the one who wants to fill us and bless us more than we could ever believe.